Thank you very much. It's always a challenge to come up with new material every Heartland conference, but I hope I kept to the theme, although I think we're going to divert a little bit from action items. We'll get back to it at the end. I'm going to give you an update of some of the latest trends and developments in the global warming debate, some scientifically and some politically. This was the the climate rally last September in New York City. This was the People's Climate March, and this was the Earth Vigil, and they were very serious about this. We got called security on us. They did not want to be filmed. This was, like an ancient ritual. They were very hostile about this, but I think it set the theme. This was at the opening of the actual march, led by Bill McKibben and Al Gore and Leonardo DiCaprio. They were all greeting the marchers as they started the parade, this Earth Vigil. We live in a new age. It's called poisoned weather, according to the global warming establishment. Climate activist Brad Johnson, fossil-fueled tornado hits northern New Orleans. The recent Houston floods are all caused by poisoned weather. And there's CO2, of course, we know the beneficial effects, and there's poison. This is what they're claiming, and this is their new talking point. It's not even global warming, climate change, global weirding, it's poisoned weather. But skeptics are firing back. 3 consecutive years of drought. This is absurd. All the global warming people seem to be attributing every impending change of climate to mankind. 1871, the Brisbane Courier newspaper said that. They had these same kind of claims back in the 19th century, people claiming that the climate was changing due to man. This is global warming skeptics firing back. Every season is sure to be extraordinary. Every month, the driest or the wettest, they go on to this whole thing. Again, 1871, newspaper editorial nailed the global warming establishment's memo of 2015 and the alleged poisoned weather. The good news, and this is very important for policymakers, every year since 1989, Gallup polling does polls on climate, and it usually comes out in March. Well, this March, this was a shocker. Normally, global warming comes out in Pew and in Gallup, 19th, 20th, or 14 out of 15, or 15 out of 15. This year, global warming didn't even make the list of issues of concern. And it gets more interesting. Every year, they do the same poll about environmental issues. Global warming is not only not on a list of concerns of all issues, it's the least amount of concern for environmental issues. This is astounding. No matter how much money, media, promotion, propaganda, children's movies, textbooks, everything, it's dead last behind species, clean air, clean water. It's tropical rainforest, which is a faded issue. If you remember the Save the Amazon, Sting's rainforest concerts to the 90s, that faded issue still beats global warming by 1 point of an issue of concern. Does the global warming science matter? Well, this is what we're dealing with. Connie Hedegaard, the EU Climate Commissioner. I got to go to Greenland when I was in the Senate working for Senator Inhofe on a fact-finding mission to Greenland. Now, this was a fascinating trip because we went with Senator Boxer and a whole host of other senators. It was so cold on the trip that the senators had to huddle in the little boats to stay warm because we were there in actually July, but it was so cold, and they were there to promote global warming alarmism. And we were on a huge carbon footprint. We took helicopter rides, boats, planes. It was an unbelievable trip. But this lady, who later became the climate commissioner, said the science, even if they're wrong, they're doing right by science. And Tim Wirth, the former senator, has said the same thing. It doesn't matter what the science is. They want to do the policy. The policy, of course, is centralized energy planning. U.S. Climate Chief Christina Figueres says that she's seeking a centralized transformation that's going to make life of everyone on the planet very different. She was also at the Climate March. Who wants a centralized transformation that makes your life very different? This is the naked agenda, if you will, of global warming. And then naked may come up here in a minute again, you'll see. She also, the UN climate chief, to give you an idea of what these policies are, that doesn't matter what the science is, we want the policies. She lauded one-party rule in China for doing it right. Why? Because they don't have a political system that has all these hurdles. What are the hurdles? Republicans, deniers, those are the hurdles. China doesn't have to deal with that. They just go forward and do the right thing. Dueling Datasets. Of course, the satellite data shows 18 and a half years. This is just out this month at Climate Depot with Lord Monckton's special report. The problem is the global warming establishment doesn't like this narrative. This is The Commissar Vanishes, a book by David King about Joseph Stalin, who had all these different commissars under his rule. When they became unpopular with the old Soviet regime, they would be erased from the photos. And here you see Stalin standing there next to some of his commissars. They would do something and fall out of favor. They would disappear. Well, the global warming pause, the standstill, the halt, science is now trying to remove that. They've tried to deny the pause. They've come up with 66 excuses, actually, and counting for the pause before they said, the hell with it, let's get rid of it. So they went back and they revised the temperature data. Why not? They have the power to do it, and no one's going to question them, certainly not the media. This follows the same path of what we're hearing. UN scientists years ago, David Deming, testified before the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. He was testified that a fellow colleague emailed him and said, we have to get rid of the medieval warm period. Lo and behold, Michael Mann's hockey stick temperature graph came out a couple years after he received that email. Guess what? Little ice age, gone. Medieval warm period, gone. Suddenly the past became a flat line. My favorite excuse that what the global warming pause might be caused by, a UK energy minister claims that the pause in global warming, the standstill, the lack of global warming is caused because of government's green policies. And I'm not making that up. The UK energy minister says that we've slowed global warming by passing mandates for solar and wind, despite the fact that carbon dioxide continues to rise in the atmosphere. It makes no sense scientifically, even by their theory, but they're now blaming the pause on the fact that they're pushing a green agenda. Which raises that question, what is she smoking? Malaysia is now blaming, this is just June 8th, a deadly earthquake on naked tourists who dissed the mountain spirits, and they plan a ceremony to appease the gods. Appease the gods. Wow, we're going to get to that in a moment here too. But this, you might laugh and think this is funny. Again, what are they smoking? But in 1933, the government in Syria banned yo-yos because they thought it caused droughts. What were they smoking? Now in 2015, we have sitting United States senators who want to jail global warming skeptics for causing bad weather, for causing global warming. Senator Whitehouse has talked about using RICO, organized racketeering charges, to prosecute skeptics. Compares us to tobacco companies, saying it's a fraudulent campaign and the parallels are very exact to what the fossil fuel industry is doing. Essentially, we are denying that rising carbon dioxide is dangerous, just like tobacco executives denied cigarettes were dangerous. Well, here's the problem. They are the ones actually mimicking tobacco activities. They are manufacturing uncertainty and fear by proclaiming certainty and consensus based on dubious science. They are guilty of essentially saying, pay up now or the weather will get you. If you pay us, we can protect you from the weather. That sounds a lot like a protection racket. Thank you for smoking. This is fascinating. Right about the time that Senator Whitehouse is talking about RICO statutes and other people are talking about Naomi Oreskes and comparing us to tobacco scientists, smokers may be the key to solving global warming. That's an actual headline. They have cigarette smokers may hold the key. They come out with a new study from South Korea. Cigarette butts could be used to eradicate a deadly virus spread by mosquitoes. They're talking about using it as energy storage. This is an example where it's being the claims are being turned on its head. The new movie, Merchants of Doubts, Naomi Oreskes and others, this is designed to intimidate politicians across the country, to say if you're a skeptic, you are lining up with the most loathsome, evil people in the world, the global warming skeptics. Of course, I was in this movie. The reviews are in. They said I was the villain. The reviews, these are from LA Times, New York Post. Terrifyingly impressive, sadistic, anti-hero, chatty prevaricator, slick, scary, loathsome mercenary. My favorite, a grinning skull nihilist. And the movie, it smeared Fred Singer, it tried to smear me, it smeared other skeptics. Steve Malloy had clips in it, they had clips of him. It was just Naomi Oreskes in her wildest fantasies, this kind of movie that Senator Whitehouse was in. And by the way, the movie barely made enough money to buy a couple Priuses. That's how poor the movie did. It's going to be coming out on DVD soon. But it's not just Senator Whitehouse, it's not just Naomi Oreskes. This is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I got video of him at the climate march. He called skepticism treason. The Koch brothers are treason. They should be in jail. They should be enjoying 3 hot meals, and a cot at The Hague. I wish there was a law you could punish skeptical politicians under. This is what we're up against in terms of the mainstream environmental movement. Unfortunately, the Pope is getting involved now in global warming. Now, there's no consensus at the Vatican on this issue. The Pope Emeritus, for lack of a better word, condemned climate change prophets of doom in 2007. Pope Benedict, the previous Pope, actually had a global warming summit in 2007 where they invited Fred Singer, they invited Cal Beisner, they invited Antonio Zanichi, the president of the World Federation of Scientists. They allowed actual dissent and debate. Not this Pope and not right now. In the Vatican, senior cardinal, he's at the Vatican Bank, famous quote, "In the past, pagans sacrificed animals and even humans in vain attempts to placate capricious and cruel gods. Today, they demand a reduction in CO2 emissions." Pope Francis needs to consult his previous Pope and other Vatican officials. Unfortunately, Jeffrey Sachs, and I think you've heard about this from other speakers, is one of his key advisors. Jeffrey Sachs helped helped run the Vatican Summit and the agreement they came out with just on April 28th this year. I was part of the delegation that went with Heartland on this. He's called people like Rupert Murdoch, the Koch brothers, the climate liars, and he basically says every time there's a bad storm that skeptics have blood on their hands. This is who Pope Francis and the Vatican is unfortunately listening to at the moment. This is also part of the global warming agenda. I call it an unholy alliance between the Catholic Church and the UN climate agenda. But this is an NYU professor, Matthew Lau, actually promoting genetic engineering to make people smaller. And by the way, my film, Climate Hustle, will be out at the end of summer. We have exclusive video of Matthew Lau talking about shrinking humans, talking about giving people drugs to make them care more. Those Gallup polls, once this NYU professor is done with the American public, the numbers will be way up because they want to drug us to care more about global warming, to adopt the necessary behavioral and market solutions for curbing climate change. Global warming is now so all-powerful that it's impacting the dead. And this is actual claim, March 9th, fresh off the presses. Climate change causes mummies to turn to black ooze. I believe it's in Peru. Allegedly, the warming temperatures is causing the humidity levels to increase, and the mummies are disintegrating faster. So when you die, you can't escape the clutches of man-made global warming. The political tipping point. This is a very serious point here. In 2016, if a Democrat president wins with a typical global warming agenda, or a weak Republican, and I define weak at the moment as Chris Christie, Jeb Bush, and Lindsey Graham, and who else? Give me another name. Those are the three, and the guy from Maine, or not Maine, what's his name? One of the lesser, Chafee, Lincoln Chafee. If any of them get it, it's really bad. But even some of the mainstream ones, they're going to be under a lot of pressure. The problem is they will make permanent the EPA regulations if a Democrat wins. They will make whatever treaty we sign in December, which will happen. They will sign some treaty, whether it's some piece of paper, whether it's meaningful or not is beside the point. They will have a ceremony. They can make that more permanent. And we're going to be faced like Australia, having to wait till 2020 to then repeal all of this, kind of like Australia repealed their carbon tax after they passed it. But action items, right now, the GOP Congress should be looking at, because the Democrats in Congress aren't going to be doing this, defunding the EPA, threatening to defund it, defunding the UN IPCC, our contribution, stopping the rubber stamping of the UN IPCC reports, and questioning whether President Obama, as his stated intention, can actually sign a new treaty without ratification. He wants it to be essentially ratified under the existing 1992 Rio Earth Summit Treaty. This used to be, we used to have optimistic visions of the future. That back at the old World's Fairs, you'd have the flying cars, you'd have this limitless world. Of course, now we end up with George Clooney's movie, and it's all about the apocalypse and end times. This, unfortunately, if all of this goes through, may be our future. The UK energy chief warned a few years ago, constant electricity at home is ending. Remember the old California rolling blackouts around 2000, 2001? That may be reality because they're actually warning people now, because of the renewable energy standards in Europe, families would have to get used to only using power when it was available. Now, people are used to that in the developing world, but we're shooting ourselves in the foot in the developed world by actually adopting all of these green energy policies. And by the way, they're now claiming credit for the global warming pause, which they made 66 excuses for, and which now no longer exists, according to them, because they erased the data. It's very confusing to keep up with all this. But this potentially is our future, and I like to say it's always Earth Hour in North Korea. And you see North Korea has just the one dot of light. Every year when they have Earth Hour, when the people are supposed to turn off their lights, we always like to remind them that it's always Earth Day and Earth Hour, Earth Day in North Korea. And it's coming. My movie will be out probably early fall. This film, we're trying to combine the humorous elements and trying to make it a direct response to everything that's happened in the global warming debate since Al Gore's film came out in 2006. This film will feature this premise: global warming fuels caused global cooling before fossil fuels caused global warming. We actually go back and we found the archives from the 1970s. We found news anchors. We found old articles and news reports of the 1970s global cooling consensus. One of the most shocking things we found, and this is them saying that fossil fuel burning will screen out the sunlight, it'll drop 6 degrees within 50 years. This was NASA scientists saying this in the 1971 during the alleged cooling period that never happened, the global cooling episode that never happened. Our film will reveal a mascot animal that literally was used in the 1970s to prove man-made global cooling, and the same animal is being used now to prove man-made global warming. I'm not going to release the name of the animal yet, but it's going to be a surprise. It's the only animal we've been able to identify, and this is a Climate Hustle exclusive that is used as a mascot for global cooling and global warming. It's a dual-use technology animal. I will hold the identity of that till later notice, but it's going to be shocking. Now, the key thing about our film, besides trying to be humorous and entertaining, we profile politically left scientists who essentially reversed themselves or became skeptical after examining the evidence and have now no longer welcomed by the global warming establishment. So we actually show scientists who openly admit they voted for Al Gore, they would vote for him again, they think he's a smart man, but they were appalled when they saw the movie. And a lot of scientists you haven't heard of as being skeptical before. There's going to be some new names in there. And this movie is going to be, look forward to it by around September or so. We're looking at a theatrical, we're looking at DVD, we're looking at all sorts of stuff. So my message is carbon-based energies are the moral choice. And that's what we have to remember. Don't make apologies for carbon-based energies, especially as the United Nations Treaty comes closer and closer. We are looking at a UN agenda that's going to essentially try to stifle development in the third world and/or just be about transferring wealth. They actually admit it, redistribution of wealth is their goal by climate policy. And also remember, no matter how bad you think it might be, acts of UN and Congress, they cannot control the weather. If we faced that catastrophe, a climate catastrophe, and we had to rely on the United Nations, we would literally all be doomed. So for that, I will take questions and question and answer when we're all finished and talk about specific candidates or anything else Republican. I do think the 2016 election is going to be the political tipping point. This is that important. If a Democrat is elected with a global warming agenda, we face 4 very long years on the global warming policy side. Thank you.